Hello there. So today we shall be starting off with the first lesson under Unit 1 of your Facilitating Learner-Centered Teaching. So this particularly focuses on learner-centered teaching, its foundations and characteristics. So there is this very important quotation by Robert Silvester, which says, "Although it may irritate the teacher, one of the most intelligent questions a student can ask is, why do we have to do this? Why is it intelligent for someone, particularly for a learner like you, to be asking this question?" Well, that means that if you are this certain type of learner, then you are someone who knows exactly what purpose you're trying to accomplish, what goal are you headed forward to, or where are you being led to as you do something. And this characteristic is usually known as self-regulation. Someone who is self-regulated would often ask this question. Because it's kind of a characteristic that makes someone purposeful. Okay? So, let's say for example, you are engaged in an activity. Of course, you think, okay? You think of something, of an end in mind, like what's gonna be my learning after I involve myself in this? Or what will I get from doing this? Or others would think of what could be the tangible output that I could make out of doing such a thing. Okay, so many things thus a learner who is self-regulated have to really ask. And if you are someone, of course, who randomly asks this question, then it is intelligent of you to do so. But if you are, on the other hand, the learner who never dares ask this question, then perhaps you have to ask yourself. Otherwise, you are not geared towards the end of your journey, or perhaps there is something that you have to check. Okay, because you might just be doing things out of compliance, and you don't really give your passion and your all if you don't get to ask this question. Okay, so that's it. It's really sometimes irritating, especially if how do you call this, if questions like these would ask from young learners. But it's engaging if these questions, or if this question per se, would be asked by learners in your level. It will make the discussion more appealing. It will make the exchanges, more academic. Okay? And it will also help the teacher in turn to really make the learning process a goal-oriented one. Because, if there are no learners in the classroom that would ask this question, then there would be teachers who will just be laxed enough and would just cater learning in a day without really having an end in mind, or without having an objective to achieve in a day. Okay? So it pays to ask the question. Other than, of course, it is an advantage on your part, it will make the learning, as I have said earlier, a more engaging process. Okay? So let's move forward. Yeah, of course, you are expected in this unit, though this is yet your lesson 1 under this unit. It is expected of you to determine the characteristics and fundamentals of learner-centered teaching. You are also expected to relate to the importance of the 5 key dimensions of learner-centered teaching, and of course to generate new classroom activities responsive to learner-centered paradigm shift. Okay, with that being said, this lesson, of course, will particularly make you explain the nature and characteristics of learner-centered teaching and demonstrate understanding of the concepts and principles of learner-centered teaching based on educational philosophies and researches and their application in actual learning. And I hope you guys are ready to do that with me. All right. So let's first define what learner-centered teaching is, okay? Of course, there are a lot of definitions, but here and in your module, it says that learner-centered learning actually refers to a wide variety of educational programs, learning experiences, instructional approaches, and academic support strategies that are intended to address the distinct learning needs, interests, aspirations, or cultural backgrounds of individual students and groups of students. Okay, so you know this how do you call this paradigm of learner-centered teaching or learner-centered learning is actually grounded under the constructivist learning theory, which emphasizes that the learner's critical role in constructing new meaning from new information and prior experience. Meaning to say, the learners therefore should be involved, okay? And as they are being involved, they get to acquire experiences which later, okay, will form new meaning in them and then connect it with some past experiences, and then they will generate, all right, a new piece of information or a new piece of knowledge. Okay, so that's the nature of learning-centered teaching or learner-centered learning. Okay, it's most simply defined as an approach, okay, to learning in which learners choose not only what to study, but also how and why that topic might be of interest, okay? You know, this brings us back to the question earlier asked by Robert, okay? Like, why do we have to study this, okay? So, how am I gonna be interested of this topic? Why is there a need, okay, to know about this? So you just don't, if you are a learner-centered person, okay, or if you are the type of learner who really focuses on what's more in you that you could bring to your studies than what the teacher could, then you get to ask this question, okay? You don't just focus on what is given to you, okay, and then study that. But instead, there would be much of the question in your mind, like what more can I get? And that starts off with questioning, okay? Like, yeah, the whys of things. Why is it this and that? How could this be this and that? And so with all these questions that form in your mind, then you are pushed, okay, to actually be more involved, be more engaged, and then eventually you get to form new learning, because that in itself is a learner-centered learning, okay? And a learning environment has learner responsibility and activity at its heart, okay? In contrast to the emphasis on instructor control and the coverage of academic content found in much conventional didactic teaching. That's according to Canon of 2000. So in a learner-centered teaching or learning, the environment is actually centered, all right, on the learner, okay? The responsibility, all right? So let's say, for example, it's kind of a situation wherein the teacher would enter the classroom and will not, okay, necessarily have to monopolize the lecture during the day. Instead, what the teacher does is he or she brings in an activity which the learners are expected to do, to accomplish, and then later the students might as well share something about what they learned from the activity. So the teacher therefore would act as someone who facilitates the learning, okay, or who guides the process in which the learners are doing or how they are actually doing the activities, okay? So that's according to Canon of 2000. It's not really that conventional type or the usual type we know wherein you know, the teacher will just have to talk and really do lecture most of the time in a day, okay? So it's not that. That's not the idea of learner-centered teaching, okay? So we move on. So here are more of the things that you have to know about it. So what does it put first? Of course, it's your interest. It's the learner's interest. Okay? And further, it has to acknowledge student voice as central to the learning experience. Okay? So the teacher here then have to, or has to rather, welcome opinions or ideas or even supplementary knowledge coming from learners. He or she has to forget that he is the main authority in the classroom, though of course he is, primarily he is or she is, but he has to be very welcoming of new ideas or new pieces of knowledge coming from learners. Okay? And in a learner-centered learning space, students also choose what they will learn, how they will pace their learning, and how they will assess their own learning. Okay? So, curriculum or curricula under a learner-centered environment would not necessarily be predetermined. Okay? So, learners can actually choose what area they have to learn. They can... they have the freedom to choose when they are due to finish it. And of course, they are also entitled to that freedom of assessing their own learning. How far satisfied they are, how unsatisfied they are, how much more they have to do in order to meet up standards, okay, or to tell to themselves that it's okay, all right? And then, learner-centered instruction focuses on skills and practices that enable lifelong learning and independent problem solving. Yes, that's the reason why, like I told earlier, usually teachers would come in the class with activities or with anything that would allow learners to do something hands-on, all right, to involve themselves, to be in groups, to brainstorm, and then to create, okay? You know, because at the end of the day, what the learner-centered teaching prepares the learners is to become problem solvers, all right? Because this is what the world is wanting them to be prepared for. Okay. And then, learner-centered instruction, of course, or learning, aims to develop learner autonomy, all right, or the self-dependence and independence by putting responsibility for the learning path in the hands of students, by imparting to them skills and the basis on how to learn a specific subject and schemata required to measure up to the specific performance requirement. So, what does this mean? Of course, they are entitled, learner-centered learning would want to entitle you learners to become dependent on yourselves, but to become also independent, okay? When are you supposed to be independent? Of course, on your responsibility for your learning path, okay? This means to say that while you are with that authority, okay, to make your learning your own choice, you are also, how do you call this, being guided somehow, okay, of how you are to acquire skills and how should you start learning something, and then later on they'll just give you the freedom to do them your own, because they are still there, your teachers, to guide you, okay, so that you get to pave that track where you are supposed to be led, okay? So that's learner-centered learning. Okay, and moving on, learner-centered learning is also known as a learner-centered education, which broadly encompasses methods of teaching, shifting the focus of instruction from the teacher to the student. Okay, so I have already told something about this. And of course, even for the next two, for the last two characteristics in here, that is, of course, with the aim to develop learner autonomy and independence, like I have said earlier. And then that which says learner-centered learning is characterized by innovative methods of teaching. Okay, of course the teacher is still there again and again, don't forget that, but of course the role of the teacher is to give premium responsibility for the learner to create their own learning. All right, and of course develop skills along the way of doing the learning process. Okay, now we move forward, and here are the characteristics of learner-centered teaching according to Weimer of 2012. So the first point here tells us that learner-centered teaching engages students in the hard, messy work of learning. Look at that. Okay, you guys are supposed to be involved in the toughest of tough, of course, and in a messy type of learning. That's fun. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, engaging in a hard, messy work of learning in the classroom is manifested when teachers allow students to work via task-based and problem-based learning. Okay, so learning from this perspective means that learning becomes meaningful when learners explore their learning environment rather than passively to teachers. Okay, so this first point brings us to that to the wisdom, okay, of letting the students do instead of letting the learners do, and then they will just have to passively listen, look. Okay, it's actually a shift. Okay, the focus is to let learners do, let them create, no matter how messy it can be, because that is actually the purpose, okay, of a learner-centered teaching. Okay, so here are examples provided. So it tells there, let's say for example in a language class, okay, a language teacher may give his or her students pictures from which they could create paragraphs and any form of discourse which could serve as the starting point in teaching a grammar lesson. Okay, or yeah, because these are in other subjects, let's make it particular to your class. So since you guys are in the physical education field, then what can how can teachers do this? So let's say for example you are in a dance class. Okay, so your teacher gave you a literature of a dance, or you know, rules and standards, or like steps to follow. So how can a teacher make you be involved or be engaged in a learner-centered teaching type given your subject? So the teacher can actually group you in pairs maybe, or yeah, in groups of 4, and then he can actually distribute literatures among your groups, and then he will later ask you to execute how you understand or how you understood what the literature is actually trying to say. So in there, the teacher can actually check how far your analysis can go, and then he can just actually intervene, correct you, and redemonstrate the stuff or the steps that you guys have not actually performed accordingly. Okay, so these are examples, and of course more examples are provided there in your module. Another to that of Weimer is learner-centered teaching includes explicit skill instruction. When we say something is explicitly done, something is very obvious, you know, something needs to be well exposed, okay, so that you get to see it, you get to realize that it's actually it. Okay, so that's something explicit. Okay, so in here it tells that learner-centered teachers teach students how to think, okay, how to solve problems, how to evaluate evidence, how to analyze arguments, how to generate hypotheses, and all those learning skills essential to mastering material in the discipline. Okay, so if you get to trace what this explicit skill instruction actually aim, you know, this is to make you or to form you of a higher type of individuals, because it's more of the higher level, okay, higher order thinking skills. These are HOTS, okay. So they do not assume that students pick up these skills on their own automatically, all right? So this is again the emphasis. You know, learner-centered teaching does not actually omit the teacher in the process. In fact, the teacher is still a very crucial person along the process because he is supposed to be there initiating the process, starting it off, and guiding the learners. Okay, that is what it is trying to point out here in the explicit skill instruction. You know, the teacher, of course, has to, like I said, model, okay, to demonstrate first. All right, so it tells there that explicit instruction is a term that summarizes a type of teaching in which lessons are designed and delivered to novices to help them develop readily available background knowledge on a particular topic. All right, so of course, the teachers have to recognize that not all learners initially have already ideas, okay, as much as others might have. Or they should not assume, okay, that the learners know exactly how it is done immediately or right after, or right at the moment, okay. So it is therefore needed to do explicit instruction, okay. So how can this be done? Of course, it involves showing students what to do and how to do it. Again, like I have said, it's modeling, okay. And you know, explicit teaching is actually a fully guided practice, okay? The reason why I'm telling the teacher is still a very crucial part of the learning process, okay? So teachers who follow an explicit approach explain, demonstrate, and model everything. So there needs first the modeling, okay? Again, modeling is important for explicit skill instruction in learner-centered teaching, which means to say that the teacher is still first responsible on how to initiate the learning process, okay? And you see, research would consistently affirm that learning skills develop faster if they are taught explicitly along with the content, okay? So if the teacher tells something about it, it's not enough. Research would tell the teacher has to do something about it, has to explicitly, show it, how it is done, how is that actually in real life, stuff like that, okay? You know, because research would confirm that the more the learners would, adopt or gain the skill faster if this is done this way. All right, so we move forward. Okay, so we are now with the third point, and that is learner-centered teaching encourages students to reflect on what they are learning and how they are learning it. So let's say, for example, if teachers have given projects or assignments to learners and they were tasked to finish it on a certain period of time, or perhaps they have standards to follow or criteria, then the teacher can actually ask the learners after that, when they are already back to school or back in the classroom, some questions like, how did you find it? Which part were you hard up with? Okay, so, or perhaps you can also ask questions like, how did you do when you realized that some of your answers were erroneous? Or how did you confirm that your answers are correct? You know, you are actually doing this in order to challenge the assumptions of the learners about their learning, all right? And of course, to also encourage them that they actually have to take responsibility of the decisions that they make in their learning, okay? So because learner-centered teachers would want learners to be talking about how they learn, all right? And you can also actually check what they are learning if you get to ask questions like this, all right? That's the point in this third characteristic accordingly, all right? Learner-centered teachers include learning activity components in which students reflect, analyze, and critique what they are learning and how they are learning it. So learners, therefore, are also encouraged to be critical about the learning material on hand that they are studying. They can ask questions, they can clarify, all right? And the clarification may be with themselves if they are learning on their own, or they could address it with a peer, with another learner, or with the teacher himself. All right. The goal is actually to make students be aware of themselves as learners, so they get to then evaluate how far they are learning, how far they are understanding, or what's making it hard or difficult for them to actually interpret or analyze a certain concept in their learning material. And another goal is to make learning skills something students would want to develop. Because in doing so, they will get to discover. All right, you guys will get to discover where you're weak at, all right, or what new skill is interesting for you to learn, which you are capable of actually learning, and how are you going to develop, all right, in this particular interest. Okay, in this point, it also tells that activities likewise would help learners reflect on how they take responsibility for changing their learning strategies according to their needs. Because as soon as the learners would be involved in the learning process, and they get to ask questions like, where was it difficult for me to understand? How was I able to overcome it? What strategy did I apply, which have actually made me overcome it and make it easier the next time? This will actually and eventually lead the learner to discover new learning strategies which they can make use of the next time they are challenged or confronted with problems or difficulties or challenges ahead. All right, so that's it. And learners need to understand the value of the subject, vocabulary, and skills before they are willing to invest effort. Definitely, you guys will not really be able to decide how much effort you put on something if you don't really understand what you are about to do. So it pays therefore to know the nitty-gritty or the specifics or the details such as vocabulary and the skills that you really wanted to study before you get to invest effort or time or even much of your ability in that particular matter. Okay, so we're on the fourth point. All right, so learner-centered teaching motivates students by giving them some control over learning processes. Okay, so how is this realized or materialized in classroom setup, or perhaps even during online setups like we are into now? You guys, during the first, usually during the start of classes, would get to negotiate with your learners, okay? Let's say, for example, you don't want the classroom atmosphere to be teacher ruled, all right? So you want your learners to become responsible of other stuff too in the classroom management. So how do you get to realize that? You can actually ask learners, okay, to contribute to rules that you guys both want to materialize in the classroom, so that at the end of the day, you will see them responsible, and you will check, okay, whether they are accountable of the inputs or the rules that they have actually contributed during the first day of the classes. What else are other factors, okay, that would motivate student, okay, to have control over learning process? When you make or when you think of projects or assignments or any portfolio assessment for that matter, or any other activity that you want them to do, you can actually also involve them in creating criteria, all right? So you can ask them what probably are considerations you have to put in record in order for them to observe while they will do the project or even when they are done with the output, so that grading is a shared responsibility, so that later at the end of the day, you'll get to see that the performance or the output is meeting, all right, the standards that you as a teacher want and that they as a learners are expecting. Okay, so that's point number 4. Example would be teachers can actually give open-ended projects where options for students Choice might include how to structure and define the task, what topics to cover, what information and resources to utilize, the format of the outcome, and with whom they can work with. So you're giving them the freedom, all right, to choose members, all right, to choose the topic, all right. So these are, this is actually just one of the many examples that we could make use of. And the example, of course, that I have done, I have given earlier is usually a classic done by most teachers during this period, okay? There's negotiation and involvement in the rule making. And the last is learner-centered teaching encourages collaboration, all right? So here it sees classrooms, whether it's online or face-to-face, as communities of learners. The belief here is that learners get to be more, how do you call this, giving or more participative if they are actually doing it with peers or sharing it with someone, all right? And you know, for a fact, researchers would confirm, okay, that the students can learn from and with each other. True enough, we learn much when we are with people because we are coming from different walks of life and we share variety of experiences and even background knowledge, all right? In this point, certainly, of course, the teacher has the expertise and the obligation to share, definitely. But teachers can learn from students as well. Think about that, okay? Yeah, and I admit I also learn from my students as well. And learner-centered teachers undoubtedly have the experience and the responsibility to share it. But teachers should also learn from students. Again, we are open to that idea and we are very welcoming to the fact that indeed there are much to be learned from learners. No matter how we call ourselves authorities in the classroom, still there are yet to be learned from learners, especially you millennials. From us millennials, there are so many things, wide array of knowledge and even encounters that we get to see and that some of our teachers actually don't, all right? So learner-centered teachers are working to build frameworks which foster shared commitments of learning. That is the reason why here in point number 5, collaboration is encouraged so that we get to, share with community, and we call our groupings a community of learning. And that's actually building up the commitment to learn in a shared concept, right? And the last is learner-centered activities with this characteristic per se would include interactions such as engaging students on group works and collaborative pairs. So these are just examples, okay? So if your teachers then would allow you to work in group, to collaborate, to do brainstorm, and then later on create, think, pair, share is one good example, TPSR. All right, these are activities and much more are activities that would cater to this particular characteristic of a learner-centered teaching. So these are all for the day, and I hope you guys would be able to follow as I have instructed you earlier during our orientation that after the lecture you are supposed to comment in, all right, your realization, your reflection of the topic, or any particular point in the topic that interests you the most, and we just get to tell something about it in 3 to 5 sentences, and then that would actually mean your attendance for the day, and you are only limited to do that within the time frame of our class, all right? Which means to say that off and out that would mean you are not counted in for the attendance during this session, okay? So thank you so much and see you guys in the next topic. Bye-bye.